Baldur's Gate 3 had a lengthy early access period before its release, letting players have a chance to experience Act 1 and give their feedback on the game. This led to many things being rewritten, changed, or entirely scrapped. Here are 8 things that were cut from Baldur's Gate 3. Number 8. The Nautiloid. During early access, the nautiloid had an explorable outdoor area where dragons and imps could be seen assaulting the ship. You would also be able to talk with several enthralled cultists who have clearly lost their minds.
Shh! We're the robbers, and they're the watch. Ready? Aim!
There were 5 in total, none of which are in the game today. These thralls could be seen firing cannons to defend the nautiloid, and in the corner there were 2 imps discussing their state of mind.
Oh, Mind Flayer scrambled your brains, eh?
This outdoor area was the largest section which was cut, but the rest of the nautiloid also saw minor changes. There was a miniature jumping tutorial before meeting Lizelle, the imp battle was not forced, and the room had boxes scattered about with stairs leading to the outdoor areas. These sphincter doors all functioned automatically, and the cutscenes to see the Mind Flayer transformation appeared quite different. In the earliest builds of the game, Shadowheart couldn't even be rescued from her pod. One section which stayed mostly the same was the escape sequence to reach the transponder, with the only big changes being the addition of a 15-turn time limit and the Mind Flayer's voice.
Enthralled. Connect the nerves of the transponder. We must escape. Now!
To this day, a battle axe can be seen through this window as the only survivor of this cut upper deck. It's not known why so much of this content was removed, but it was likely so that players could get into the real story just a tad bit quicker. Number 7. The Enthralled Fisherman. In the earliest versions of the game, when approaching the nautiloid's crash site, 3 fishermen could be seen attempting to dig an injured Mind Flayer out of the rubble. When speaking with them, they would beg you for help in rescuing the creature. No matter what you say, they would blame you for causing its injury, then attack the player, as this is the same Mind Flayer that was aboard the ship you just caused to crash. The first turn of combat plays out normally, but during the second turn, battle would pause for the creature to talk, giving you a chance to save them from the Mind Flayer's control. At any point, you could also kill the Mind Flayer to instantly end the fight, freeing these fishermen. Afterwards, they would explain that due to the Mind Flayer's influence on their thoughts, they believed that this was their daughter buried in the rubble, and they even crashed their boat out of desperation to get here as quickly as possible. This encounter would show how much power Mind Flayers have over one's mind and help explain why there are so many dead fishermen all around the beach. After the battle, they run away, sensing the tadpole in your mind, fearing that you too are an illithid.
There's something in your head. Please, we'll take our chances out here. Just leave us be.
You could follow them back to the sea where they'll confirm the damages to their equipment. To this day, their crashed boat and other fishermen's mangled corpses can be found in the game, but all of the living fishermen were cut by release in favor of the kissing scene with the Mind Flayer. Number 6. The Dream Visitor. Starting as early as the character creation screen, almost everything to do with the early access version of the Dream Visitor ended up being removed. The release version of this screen says this:
You need a guardian. Choose one.
While the early access version would say,
Tell me, who do you dream of at night?
during the day, if you used your illithid wisdom powers to influence someone during dialogue, then that night your dream visitor would appear. The first time it would just appear as a voice.
Where are you?
But after repeated use of illithid wisdom, your entire camp would experience a night of sickness. During this night, your companions would appear visibly green, with some of them having their own cut conversations related to how they're feeling.
What a godstab. More blood. That's a pretty sight.
That same night, the dream visitor would appear, being somewhat sexual, and promising to make you feel better before leaving a parting gift. The next morning, you'd wake up with a new illithid power in your spellbook. The next time the visitor appears, they'll be more aggressive, then show you the future where you stab this random guard and watch Baldur's Gate burning in the distance. Back then, players didn't really know what this meant, and even with today's game knowledge, it doesn't really make a lot of sense. The last dream visitor scene involved them being very angry with you,
Wake up.
before your character finds a sudden urge to choke them.
Something inside you clamors for blood, for death, and only the tear of flesh will do. It wants him.
You monster. You deserve everything that's coming for you. Good night.
Because of how obviously non-trustworthy the Dream Visitor appeared every step of the way, Larian replaced the Dream Visitor with the Dream Guardian we have now. In my opinion, a much better character. Number 5. Illithid powers. The system we have now of collecting parasites to pick and choose your abilities was entirely created for the launch, with the original gifts from your Dream Visitor idea being completely scrapped. Originally based on your class, you would wake up after using Illithid Wisdom 3 times to find a new spell. Many of those spells got reworked into the existing system, but some of them were entirely cut. The list of cut ones include the Druid's Abhorrent Shape ability, which let you wild shape into an Intellect Devourer. Fighters would receive Psionic Pull, which let them pull a creature directly to you without giving them a chance to save. Warlocks could teleport directly next to an ally for a bonus action. Rogues received Ink Blot, which let you hide in a cloud of darkness. Wizards had Reflective Shell, which let you return any projectile back to an enemy. Sorcerers had Horrific Visage to terrify a target while dealing 1d4 psychic damage. And finally, Barbarians used Endless Rage, which let them deal extra damage but take extra damage while raging. All other class-specific abilities like the Cleric's Survival Instinct got repurposed into the new Illithid system for release. If anything, this was a lot less overpowered than the stuff we have now, but it could have been very interesting to see what else Larian had planned for each class later on. Number 4. Items. During early access, magical items were quite rare compared to now. Many of the items that did exist ended up being nerfed, like the Everburn Blade. Some were buffed, like the Club of Hill Giant Strength and Falara Luve, and some items, like Ilmater's Aid, were cut entirely with no other item in the game's release having a similar effect. A few other cut items include the Ring of Restorative Gravity, which pulled targets you healed towards you, the Robust Chain Shirt, which dealt damage to those attacking you, and the Amulet of Elemental Torment, which when standing in a surface would cause your spells to transfer that same surface's effect to an enemy. There were also plans for a belt slot, as your character sheet had one, but no belts existed and that was cut by release. Not only were most items during early access terrible, but the price of them was also absurd. Psychic Spark used to cost over 1,000 gold on the vendors. Alchemy didn't exist back then, so many of the alchemical ingredients had no function, or they would solely function as camp supplies. Very early in the game's development, all food was able to be eaten to restore your health, which is likely why things like raspberries, gruel, and suspicious meat still have this function today. In the Underdark's Selûnite outpost, originally it had a red shard gem rather than the moonstone, which kinda makes more sense because destroying this gem causes the lights to turn on, and the shard gem explained that it blocked the light. Which I'm still not really sure why the moonstone does that today. Number 3. Story changes. I hesitate to call these retcons as all of early access was subject to change, but many things were rewritten or cut that impact the story. In the Druid's Grove, a book could be found explaining how Halsin killed Isabel using the glaive found in the basement of the library. This was of course removed later on, and to this day we don't know who killed Isabel. Another big change was our characters having violent urges. It's been speculated that all custom characters were originally planned to be ball spawns, as at one point our characters would need to roll to avoid having random murderous outbursts.
It's no use. Your body seems to have a mind of its own as you move to strike the goblin dead.
No!
While sailing to Grimforge, the narrator would explain that you have a lust for blood, and with the Dream Visitor, your character would just straight up choke them for no reason. These examples, plus the stabbing of a random guard, could further back this idea up. Many players gave feedback that they didn't like being forced into these violent urges, and it's likely what led to the creation of the Dark Urge at release. Another story-related change was the artifact cutscene showing the Chosen. Today it's an outline of Ketheric, Gortash, and Orin, but rather than an actual story change, this was likely just incomplete models, as many other models saw updates during development, such as Scratch, Minthara, the Spectator, and Karlach. As Karlach wasn't a companion back then, the entire questline with the Paladins of Tyr was changed to more favor siding with her. Interestingly, the dwarf rogue near the Paladins was also cut, being one of very few Act 1 NPCs entirely deleted. Number 2. The Attack Camera. In the game settings, there used to be a checkbox called Attack Camera, which would randomly zoom the camera in mid-battle for an action shot of what was going on. More often it would do this during critical hits, but often it felt entirely random. This could even occur during enemy actions, and sometimes came across looking pretty cool. Personally, I liked the feature, and while searching about it, many others enjoyed it too. It had existed all the way from the beginning until the end of early access, and there was no mention of Larian as to why it was cut. But if I had to take a guess, it's that many areas were not designed to be seen from this POV, and the camera would come across quite janky sometimes when this occurred. And at number 1, probably the largest source of cut content from early access, is Wyll. His voice actor was changed and character almost entirely rewritten,
Slice his feet off and make him eat them.
with every interaction he originally had being removed from the game. Like I mentioned earlier, Karlach was still in the game, but not a companion, and Wyll's story had nothing at all to do with her. Instead, he would join the party asking to kill the goblins and free Halsin. Taking him into goblin territory would lead to several unique interactions, as he kept it a secret from the player that the goblins are the ones who took his eye.
Nice to see you, Captain. Thought you'd burn with the other corpses. Gods damn you!
You will point me to Spike, and then I will make you suffer!
Look at that! The captain grew some bollocks!
From here on out, he became Mr. Anti-Goblin, talking over and over only about killing gobbos.
Hey, Gobbo, you and me, we kill the Goblin Horde's leaders. I do my best goblin killing at sunup.
Once inside the Goblin's camp, he would ask Spike the Torturer where they took Mizora, another secret he'd been keeping from the player. He would go as far as torturing this innocent man to get the information. Spike would explain that some drow took Mizora from the nautiloid's crash site all the way to Moonrise Towers, and Wyll would reveal that the only way out of his pact is to either free Mizora or kill her. This goblin Spike was the one who took Wyll's eye and could be killed to get it back for him, but it didn't really do anything. Whenever speaking with the goblin leaders, Wyll would encourage you to attack them.
A priestess, one of the leaders, no doubt about it. Let's make her squeal.
And if you've defeated all three and go to the camp party scene, Mizora would interrupt any romance attempts with Wyll, as she was able to use his eye to somehow influence him. Outside of the goblin camp, Wyll had a few other interactions.
Yeva? What in the hell's happened?
Goblins happened, Wyll! Now make yourself useful! Push, damn it!
Gauntlet Yeva in Walking's Rest would mention disliking Wyll as they had a previous history working together. This is likely why Gauntlet Yeva appears in the Mind Flayer colony of Act 2 despite being kind of a nobody of a character in the release. Duke Ravengard was likely not planned to be Wyll's father, as Wyll would mention that he knew of Ravengard, but had little reaction when Florrick asked you to locate him.
I know Ravengard, the heart of a dragon.
It's possible he was lying to the player though, as this version of Wyll wasn't exactly forthcoming when it came to secrets.
Counselor, you mustn't trust this so-called Blade of Frontiers.
He'll talk himself up, weave a nice tale. But I know the truth. And truth is, he's no hero.
One man's hero is another man's villain. Isn't that right, Wyll?
Most people didn't like this early access version of Wyll and thought a guy who hunted goblins was kinda lame. But I am curious what his story could have been. Anyways, that's going to wrap up this video of Baldur's Gate 3's early access cut content. If you're interested in seeing more of these old versions of the game, let me know. Special thanks to my channel members for supporting me, and until next time, Proxy out.